Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build this FT-17 from first to fight. This is a 72nd scale plastic model intended for their wargame Redbank 1939, and you might say,
"Oh, 1939? That's a little bit late for an FT-17.
And yeah, it's probably not going to be much good against tanks of that era, but they were still a mobile gun with armor, and probably still quite useful behind the front line, against things like people who aren't armored. Auxiliary functions, as the back of the box says in the little paragraph of information. You can also see there's a basic painting guide using Vallejo colors. There's also instructions, and instead of the usual 4-panel instructions, there are 2. These are quite simple, and it is a fairly simple model, so that's fine. There is a copy of these instructions available on the First to Fight website, which is quite handy if your eyeballs don't have a zoom function and you'd like to see the instructions a little bit closer. Inside the box, we find 2 sprues moulded in a dark green plastic. This first one has the tracks and body. These parts are quite nice looking. They're well detailed and neatly moulded. There is, of course, mould lines, but they're very minor, so you won't be doing a lot of cleanup with this kit. There are a couple of small bits which could be a little fiddly. If you've seen some of my other First to Fight videos, I do sometimes have issues with thin, small bits in these kits. It seems they really like to break. Fortunately, there aren't really any parts like that in this kit, just a couple of small bits, none of which seem to be especially breakable. There does seem to be enough turret parts here to make almost 2 complete turrets. It looks like the only thing stopping you from doing this is the dome that goes on top of the cupola. It's not a real problem, but it would have been kind of nice to be able to make 2 turrets. The parts do look good, and that's really the main thing. As usual, there's a magazine with the model, and this is issue number 13. It's in Polish, so I can't read it, and I think at this point it's kind of obvious that I'm not learning Polish. The painting guide here, while still basic, is pretty nice. I think this is a good reference, and I like that there's a sort of step-by-step thing on the right. A very simple 4-step thing, but it might still be helpful. There's a couple of pictures that could also be useful as references. That's what you get in the box. Well, the magazine doesn't come in the box, but you know what I mean. Time to glue some bits of plastic together. I start with the hull, which is almost a single piece. I think it looks pretty good. You can't model it with the hatches open or anything like that, but that's pretty normal for a First to Fight kit. The important thing is that it looks nice, and it does. The whole bottom is easy enough to glue into place, so I do that. It comes with the no fun allowed anti-wheelie device moulded into it, and considering how fiddly the bits that go onto this later are, I think this was a good choice. Next, the track sets, which do look quite well detailed. There's a good amount of depth here considering that these are a single part. On the inside of these, we glue this little plate thing. To attach the track sets to the hull, we'll need this little axle-y thing at the front. It was slightly tricky to figure out exactly how this should be positioned, but I think I've got it right. I guess it makes sense to follow this with the installation of the track sets. It's not too hard, though there are only 2 contact points, and if you haven't let the glue bond on the front axle part, it'll probably move around a bit, and you may have to do a bit of eyeballing to make sure things are lined up properly. The parts do go together well enough, and it looks good, but it's not going to be particularly strong. I set that aside to let it bond, so that it wouldn't just fall apart with further handling, and while we wait for that, it seemed to be a good time to build the turret. This kit is meant to be built with the angular turret, but if you wanted, you could build the rounded one. I wouldn't stop you. The first thing I did was glue the bottom of the turret into place. Then, I gave it a nice little domed hat.
You're so childish, Herbert.
I follow this by gluing the pair of doors onto the back of the turret. There's a shallow recess for this, which makes it very easy to get this right. Then, on the front, the gun. In this case, it's a machine gun, but if you wanted, you could probably kajigger the 37mm onto this as well. Well, not as well, but instead. I didn't feel a need for that, so I just went with what the instructions wanted. And that's the turret completed, nice and simple. And now, we can add some details to the hull. I add this box to the left side, and there are some obvious mounting holes for it, and I'm sure you'll agree that it ends up looking rather box. On the other side, a shovel. The size of the shovel should give you an indication of how tiny these tanks are. It is very tiny. It was a little bit fiddly to get this into place, but mostly because I just didn't want to apply any pressure to the tracks. Behind that, I add the muffler. Again, this is pretty simple to install thanks to the mounting holes and pins. Then, I add bracing to the anti-wheelie tail. There are some little recesses that act as guides on the lower part of this, and that'll help you get the bracing into place. This part was actually a little bit less fiddly than I was expecting. Not that I'm complaining about that. Next, the top parts of the bracing. This was a little bit more fiddly. The instructions do seem to want you to put all of these bracing parts together before adding them to the tank, but I think it's easier to do it the way that I've done it. The tiny bar part that goes a bit forward of the cross part was probably the most fiddly bit, and I'm probably lucky that it didn't get eaten by the carpet monster. I got it into place, though it may or may not be in exactly the right position, but I think it looks fine. I understand that this is a place where they would throw tarps and other bits of stowage, so if you're not happy with how this has turned out, you could always cover it with some tarps or something. I think it looks okay enough as it is though. The final step is to use the locking tab mechanism, which oddly only has one tab. Seems like one tab is enough though, and the turret stays in place pretty well. And that's the 72nd scale FT-17 from First to Fight completed, and a cute little tank it is. I'm rather happy with how it's turned out. It was a nice, quick and simple build, which is exactly what I was looking for at the time, and I think you will agree that the result is quite nice. So I would say if you're looking for some FT-17s in 72nd scale, either for a game or for display, this is a pretty good choice, and it's relatively inexpensive, which is always a bonus. The only problem I have with it is that the tracks aren't especially strong, so you will have to be careful when handling the model. I guess it's not the worst thing in the world if you plan to use this for a display, but it is intended as a gaming piece, and that means it is going to be handled. I guess you could modify it to add some extra support to the tracks, but I haven't done anything like that, but I don't actually see myself playing a game with it anyway. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comment section below. If you've built one of these, or any other cool models, and you want to share, why not drop by our friendly Discord community and show us some pictures? That'd be awesome. If you want to watch me build kits like this one live on stream, check out my Twitch channel, the link to which you can find in the description. If you haven't already done so, why not subscribe here on YouTube, and smash that bell, as the youth say, so you don't miss any future videos. Or, if you have the means, and you want to help a Herbert Erpaderp do Herbert Erpaderp things, like build models and not starve, and also see my videos a bit early, before there's any ads, consider becoming a patron. You can find links to Patreon, and all of my other things like Discord and social media, in the description below. And as always, I shall return soon. So until then, be excellent to each other, and thanks for watching. Farewell.